So the United Nations has warned that South Sudan is on the verge of going back to violent conflict if the escalating political tensions between President Salva Kiir and the country's first Vice President Dr. Riek Machar is not contained immediately. Now, this after Machar was reportedly arrested on Wednesday night by government security personnel over unclear reasons. His party, Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition, has announced that the development effectively brings the peace agreement signed in 2018 between the two parties to a collapse. But how did South Sudan find itself in this situation? We're now joined by Michael Wani. He is a South Sudanese political and governance analyst based in Nairobi, Kenya. Michael, thank you so much for speaking to NTV. How did South Sudan find itself in this situation where the country's stability is now at stake?
First of all, South Sudan got its independence in 2011. 2 years down the road, in 2013, a violent conflict erupted in Juba because of a political disagreement between the current first Vice President, Dr. Riek Machar, and the current President, President Salva Kiir over the flag bearer for the SPLM party, because we were supposed to go for election in 2015. So that political disagreement within the SPLM party led to the 2013 conflict, and that conflict led to loss of lives and led to massive displacement of people to Uganda, Kenya, and other parts of the East Africa community countries. So basically, the conflict led to the 2015 agreement that was signed in Addis Ababa. 1 year down the road, there was another conflict of 2016 because Dr. Riek and President Salva could not agree in terms of implementing the key provisions of that particular agreement. That led to the signing of the 2018 peace agreement that again brought Dr. Riek Machar back to government and to the country as the first Vice President. The agreement has 8 chapters, but I think the most important or fundamental provisions or chapters of the agreement is Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. But again, Chapter 2 is focusing about or talking about security sector reform. Remember, South Sudan, we don't have a national army as such, and that has been one of the huge challenges the country is facing. We have a lot of militias that are either affiliated to a political leader or affiliated to a military leader, or even sometimes communal or tribal militias. So Chapter 2 had envisioned us to have a national professional army, which really do not happen. So the agreement is now facing one of the most toughest moments of its life.
Mike, and that brings me to the next question. Where does the disagreements between President Salva Kiir and the first Vice President, Dr. Riek Machar, leave the agreement that we're talking about, the 2018 revitalized peace agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan?
In the national dialogue, people were asked, what is the fundamental problem of South Sudan? And people clearly said it was a leadership crisis or leadership failure in South Sudan. So what we are experiencing right now in South Sudan is basically leadership failure. The leaders, the top leaders of the country, have failed to govern the country. They have failed to move the country forward, and that is why the agreement has failed and the agreement has so far collapsed.
Is there a way out of this crisis?
There is a way out. The first thing is to de-escalate the conflict, and the way to do that is the President Salva to release Dr. Riek.
Now, earlier on, I spoke to a journalist based in Juba about the situation on ground, and this is what he had to say.
Everyone is going about their normal business this morning. Most of the roads are open for people to use and also to be able to function just like a normal day would be in the capital, Juba. Except maybe if you think about areas that lead to the presidential palace and then the residence of the first Vice President, that's where people might be fearful to use because of the current situation. But generally, the atmosphere seems to be normal, besides the inner fear that people have of the different possibilities that may unfold.
Regional and international bodies have called for an immediate cessation of hostilities, with the United Nations asking all parties to take immediate steps to protect civilians and uphold their commitments under the ceasefire to avoid deepening the humanitarian crisis. Now, IGAD, which South Sudan is a member, has warned that the current trajectory, if unchecked, could lead to a collapse of the transitional process and a relapse into full-scale war with devastating consequences for the people of South Sudan and the region at large. Now, the government of South Sudan is yet to make an official statement regarding the arrest of Dr. Riek Machar.